An Arizona Senate seat up for grabs.
There isn't a path for a Republican.
An investigation into state salaries.
Well, why did they have money to dole out very large raises to those who are close to the governor?
Plus a young mom, cancer-free. This is Arizona Week. Hello and thank you for joining us. Our coverage begins with news of Arizona Senator Jeff Flake announcing he will not seek another term in office. Earlier this week, I spoke with Arizona Public Media's Christopher Conover. He's our political reporter.
To say he's not running for re-election after only one term caught plenty of people by surprise.
This is an Arizona senator, and he talks a lot about Republican values. Let's listen to that now.
Well, I determined that to run the kind of race that I needed to run, that I felt comfortable and good about running, there isn't a path for a Republican. There simply isn't. The party is not the same as it was. As a conservative, it used to be that you can run just as a conservative, and people would look at your policies rather than where you stand on a particular president. And right now, that seems to be at the forefront of so many people's mind. And I'm simply unwilling to condone the behavior of this president and subscribe to some of the policy prescriptions that he puts forward.
Is that what we're seeing here? Republicans feeling that this is no longer their party?
That's a really interesting question because the Republican Party as a whole and publicly certainly backs the president. But now we have Senator Flake, who is not running, Senator Corker, who is not running. We have fellow Arizonan, Senator John McCain, who is certainly critical of the president. And there are those who are beginning to wonder if are we reaching a tipping point where the party will begin to turn on the president. We're just going to have to wait and see on that.
This is a Republican state, but the political environment, the climate is changing. Does this mean Democrats are in a position to possibly take one of the Senate seats?
Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema from the Phoenix area has already filed to run as a Democrat in the U.S. Senate race. She filed a while ago. She had a big fundraising quarter. She's got $4.1 million in the bank. Democratic strategists I've talked to are basically saying she is the Democrat in this race. Republicans, as soon as she announced, were out with online ads and statements painting her as very progressive. They have done this in the past. Obviously, it didn't work because she's been elected 3 times to Congress, but she is going to have a tough time, I think, catching crossover votes from some Republicans, which you are going to need to win in Arizona statewide as a Democrat. That being said, we don't know, other than Kelly Ward, what Republicans will end up in the race for U.S. Senate now. Certainly, Kelly Ward will not be the only Republican in that race.
100 very powerful seats in the U.S. Senate, especially when we think about the influence over the president. So this is a seat that a lot of people will be watching.
These are seats that do not come up very often, especially as an open seat. As was pointed out to me in the moments after Senator Flake's announcement, only 11 people, all men, have held this position in Arizona's entire state history. So these are seats that do not come up very often. So there will be a lot of positioning to get that seat.
Other headlines this week: demonstrations continue following the Arizona Republic's investigation into Governor Doug Ducey's office awarding pay raises to members of his executive staff. Here's investigative reporter Craig Harris from Phoenix.
I had reported earlier that the governor had given a pretty sizable raise to his parks director, and I wanted to figure out whether other folks had gotten raises in the governor's office, so I filed a public records request and found out, lo and behold, a lot of folks did get raises. And the raises went up to 20% for people who had the same job titles, and the average pay raise for those in the governor's staff was about 11%.
One state legislator that I spoke with said he's not so much upset about the amount of the raises, but the process behind giving these raises to some employees. Based on what you were able to learn, was the process appropriate for what should take place in state government?
Well, I mean, the governor can do whatever he wants. I mean, it's his budget. I mean, they would argue that they stayed within their budget, and since they had some attrition and since they have some fewer employees, they were able to give sizable raises to those within the governor's staff. And they said, you know, they took on some additional responsibilities and wanted to retain the best people. You know, he can do whatever he wants because he's the governor and he gets to work within his budget. I guess the question comes is that, you know, school boards and school districts aren't able to do the same thing because they only get a certain allocation from the state. And so it's not like they can move a whole lot of money around to give sizable pay raises to certain employees. They haven't been able to do that at all.
Based on what you've been able to find in your documentation, anything else that is suspicious about this or maybe raises some eyebrows when it comes to the state budget?
Agency heads receive 33% raises, 10% raises, 15% raises. A lot of folks who work at the pleasure of the governor got very, very big pay raises, while employees underneath them at the most got a 2% raise or a 3% raise. And I think that raises a lot of eyebrows, like, well, wait a minute, why is the Department of Corrections director getting a 10% raise and the most that he's given his employees is 3%? And so I think that it does raise some eyebrows as far as, well, why did they have money to dole out very large raises to those who are close to the governor or who are his friends of the governor, but people who are rank and file, there's no across-the-board raise, and the most they can get is 2 or 3%.
So what do you attribute that to based on what you've been able to learn?
Well, based on what I found is that, you know, there are two different sets of rules. There's one set of rules for the governor's staff and for agency directors, and there's another set of rules for rank and file employees about how much they can get. And I think that's what is upsetting folks, and especially with the teachers. I mean, the governor came out during his State of the State address and said, teachers deserve a pay raise. He got a huge ovation from Democrats and Republicans alike. And then when the details trickled out, his pay raise really amounted to 0.4% of a raise over the next 5 years. And then the legislature said, well, no, we'll do a little bit better, and we'll give a 1% stipend. So, you know, there seems to be a huge disparity on what the governor and legislators are giving to teachers or rank and file state employees compared to what folks who work for the governor, who may campaign for the governor, or who have given the governor campaign contributions, the kind of pay raises that they got.
What we've been able to gather, the governor's response has been through a statement. Have you received anything additional out of his office in regards to this investigative piece that you were able to put together?
Yeah, they weren't very happy about it. They sent out a 2-page statement last Friday, being highly critical of the reporting and saying that it was taken out of context, and we didn't note that some people got promotions. And the fact of the matter is we did note people got promotions. We made it clear that these were promotions or changes in job title, and the ones who got raises had the same exact job title and got a raise. And the numbers are theirs. These aren't our numbers. These are numbers from the governor's administration. One thing that was really interesting about the whole thing is that it took the governor's office 8 weeks to get me information for myself to look at pay raises within his staff or agency directors. But when the state Republican Party wanted to find out pay raises given to Democratic staffers in the House and the Senate, they got their information in 4 hours, and the Ducey administration actually did the math to help them figure out how much the raises were for the legislators, for their staff.
Late last week, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey's office issued a statement in response to the story. Among the concerns, the story contains numerous errors in data and facts and is, quote, totally devoid of context. It goes on to say the story paints a lopsided and distorted view of reality. The office says it believes a broader view of the facts paints a far different picture. In a 2-page document, the governor's office provided what it calls a fact sheet on salaries, and for some of the employees draws comparisons to the private sector. The statement ends with saying to imply that these directors have reaped some sort of undeserved windfall is nonsense and shows a total lack of understanding or a willful ignorance of how organizations work and how to promote talent within state government. For more on what Arizona legislators are prepared to do this upcoming session, here's Arizona State Senator David Bradley.
We have to confront it head on. We can't dance around and try to figure out a clever way to get money to schools. We have to deal with it head on.
Now, you serve on the Education Committee, and it's always an issue as teachers need more pay. In your opinion, was it a fair argument to immediately bring up the teacher pay and associate it with the governor, top administration pay raises?
Yeah. So I think it's more the process that the governor used. You know, he came in with, I'm the business guy, I'm going to run this like a business. And in most business, you pay people based on profitability or savings or something that they've done, and you can't see that trail in a lot of those decisions that he made. So I don't fault that, you know, he needs to recruit folks that are highly qualified, but when he brings them in at a salary that they have accepted, and then it doubles or in some cases increased by 30 or 40%, you got to say, well, so why? And just be open about explaining why and have a criteria that's clear. You know, the realities are, you know, we're 2,000 teachers short, and we've had 500 some teachers walk off the job in the first month or so. And so it's real. This is not a fake kind of thing or something that's being made up relative to teacher pay. And so getting it, you know, even if you were to take, you know, the number you keep hearing is a 27% pay raise for teachers, you know, that's about a $750 million price tag.
Which is significant.
Which is significant. And so how would you do that? But it speaks to that longitudinal problem of all the tax cuts, over $3 billion in tax cuts over the last 15 to 20 years. And now we're paying the piper. We have to realize that all these things are connected, and it's just not out of the blue that this happened.
This has become very partisan very quickly, but it sounds like you as a Democrat are saying you understand that the director of DES maybe does need to be compensated at a fair rate. Right.
And other departments as well. It's, you know, some of the raises of people that report directly to the governor. Again, it's just, you know, this is not a, you know, you say you're going to run it like a business, but it's not a business. You know, everything is public, and it's taxpayer dollars. And it may be perfectly fine to increase somebody's raise, you know, significantly, but just make it clear. So the criteria for that decision was what? And perhaps it was savings. You've eliminated 15 or 20 positions, and people are working harder, and all that. You know, that's reasonable things to say. But when you don't say anything, or I don't think he tried to cover it up necessarily, but it just kind of dropped out of the sky, you know. Yeah.
This is late October. We may not hear about this again until January when you return to the Capitol. Will it be issue number one?
Well, I think, yeah, education is always up there, and the governor's labeled himself the education governor, and he's come up with different ways to put resources into the education system. But, you know, it's over half of our budget. It's a significant amount of money. But he has to get realistic about coming up with resource to do it. There's nothing magic about this. We have to have money come in order for money to go out. And so when we look at the corporate tax cuts over the last few years, guess what that number hits? About $700 million. And guess what we need? You know, if we were to do something as dramatic as a 20% raise. So all these things are connected. So you can't, on the one hand, say you're the teachers, you know, the education governor on the one hand, and then not deal with this reality of resource. We have to get resource, and there's no magic way to do that.
On to other news now. October recognizes two important issues. One is domestic violence, the other breast cancer. We begin with domestic violence. Every 3 days in Arizona, someone dies in a domestic violence-related incident. That's according to the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. There are nearly 40 shelters and services designed to help victims throughout the state, among them the Forgach House in Sierra Vista. This last year, the home helped nearly 500 women and children from all over the country looking for a fresh start. The Forgach House offers a safe haven to victims of domestic violence. More importantly, it gives women the support they need to start over.
They're allowed to stay here for 4 months. Within that 4 months, they will receive resources. Just about anybody that they need to get in contact with, our folks here will make sure that they get in contact with them in order to assist them in moving along independently. The most special portion of the shelter to me is the people, the women who help the victims. They're the kind of people that if something ever happened to you, you would hope that they were around. 70% of our women who work here have a story of their own.
I was with my son's father, and he's my youngest son. And it was all very textbook. It was all pretty in the beginning. It was all great, you know, and things just kind of progressed. And I ended up losing all of my teeth, and he broke my face. Having lived through it and having gotten out of it, I wanted to give other girls the chance to see that it's not your entire life is not that problem that you're going through at that moment. We got a ton of donations.
Shay Jimenez walked into the shelter about 5 years ago.
I used to take a lot of it home, a lot of the stories and the problems that the people had.
Then she met Maria Morel, a woman who came to the Forgach House more than 25 years ago. A motherly figure to many, she's teaching women here how to cope, something she knows well.
That's what I learned, the word empowerment. They gave me the tools to be strong. They gave me the tools to be compassionate. Because I said, if they help me, I'm going to do the same for somebody else.
Domestic violence includes crimes, typically misdemeanors, against a family member or a roommate. It involves physical violence and other forms of coercive control. 80% of the defendants are men and 20% are women. In Tucson City Court, a dedicated domestic violence court, there are grants and working closely with shelters, lessening the amount of repeat offenders. The program's so successful, other communities across the country are using it as a model. Here's Judge Wendy Million.
Well, one of the best things that's ever happened to this, to City Court, I think, is that we have 2 advocates from Emerge that are assigned to domestic violence court. And they don't work for the court, which is good because they have a lot of credibility, I think. They just are there to represent the victims. But when we first started, we had no idea how many victims actually come to court with the offenders until we had the advocates there. And now every victim that comes to court has access to Emerge and to the resources that they can provide them, and they can talk to them about safety planning. So that's huge. A lot of courts don't have that kind of resource, but I always encourage courts, look, call your local shelter, see if somebody wants to come, because part of the problem is we didn't have any ability to find those victims. Emerge might have wanted to help, but they didn't know what courtroom those victims were in. So we've been able to funnel all of that into one place where the victims now have access to that.
Are you seeing the victims are now taking more control of their cases too because they have that support network?
And they have the ability to be heard in court. A lot of times they weren't being identified. They didn't want to identify, but now they feel more comfortable, I think. And so they speak up, and you know, we allow them, they have that autonomy. If they want to have contact with the offender, I allow them to have contact as long as I know that they've been talking to the advocate and have a safety plan, then that's their choice. And so I feel like they do have more control. They get to be heard, they talk to the prosecutors, and they're just more respected, I think, in the system.
Tell me about your firearms project. A lot of us may have read about it this week in the newspaper.
You know, I can order someone to not possess firearms, but there's really no way to check and see if they are. And there's still going to be holes because there's not a statute in this state that allows like the police to go in and search for firearms. But if someone has a firearm and I tell them to turn it in, then we're going to have a follow-through process on that. And it's also important for the defendants. And, you know, I've talked to my lawyers, a lot of people, there's a lot of different firearms involved with domestic violence. And so I think it's a really good way to educate everyone on who gets to have a gun, who doesn't, you know, when you get convicted, what happens, and things like that. So it's an education thing and it's a safety thing.
Sounds like Tucson City Court has really created this network, but also created some supports that empower some of these victims. Is that the ultimate goal, or did it just sort of happen?
No, it's the goal. The goal of all good domestic violence court models is a coordinated community response, basically. And so we have great partnerships with the probation department and with Emerge especially. We also, part of my project was to work with deaf victims of domestic violence. And so we have a whole separate project going on with community outreach program for the deaf, where they've worked, they've worked very, very hard to educate themselves in domestic violence. They work with Emerge and have referrals back and forth. And so I'm really proud of that, because the deaf community, it's really hard to reach out and have them feel like they're going to be listened to in court, because there's so many issues with interpreters and police and things like that. So that's something I'm really proud of, it that we've worked on that project too.
And that community wasn't considered part of the discussion before this?
Well, I just think that they are, it's very hard to reach out to those victims. They have a lot of extra barriers. When we talk about domestic violence victims, there's a lot of barriers for them to be involved in the system. A lot of times they don't have the resources to support themselves without the offender, things like that. But for death victims, a lot of times, there's not interpreters. So when police show up, they can't really tell their story, and they have a very insular community. And so it's hard to call out your partner, for example, when you know that everyone in the community is going to hear about that. And so it's those kind of barriers that we've been working with COPD and Emerge to try and break down and get more people into the court and have them know that we're listening. And we make sure we have interpreters. They've given us education at the court. And so it's been a really good partnership.
Finally, breast cancer also recognized this month. For the last year and a half, we've tracked the story of Jaque Lamadrid, a young woman from Douglas diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 31. Nearly 2 years later, she's a survivor, and as you're about to hear, so much more.
Today, I feel thankful and really, really good. I feel comfortable in my own skin again. My hair is growing back. That I know we had talked about that, and even though it sounded so vain, like it really did matter to me. So now my hair is back, and I just feel full of life again. Just everything's back to normal.
You're cancer-free. You've gone through reconstructive. To you, is this over?
Sometimes I don't want to jinx myself. I know it sounds weird. I don't want to say this is never going to happen, because you can never say never. I just kind of have to take it day by day, if not so much every 3 months by every 3 months, because that's when I have to go get my blood work. So every 3 months, it's kind of like the week before, 2 weeks before. I'm like, dear God, please don't let this come back.
First, you're gonna eat sopita. You guys want sopita or not?
At 31 years old, Jaque Lamadrid, a wife and a mom, faced a devastating diagnosis, stage 4 breast cancer. The mother of 4 chose a double mastectomy and began intensive chemotherapy.
I would look at myself in the mirror and I'd say, like, I don't even want to see myself. It kind of not grosses me out, not at all, but it's a shock to see your body in such a different way. And now I could look at myself and be like, okay, those are little battle scars. Like, that's okay,
How did breast cancer change you?
Breast cancer changed me. It made me, I thought I was always grateful. I thought I was a grateful person. I wasn't a grateful person. I learned how to be more grateful. I mean, there's still tons that I have to work on, but I know I'm more grateful than I was before. It let me open my eyes for the things that really matter.
There we go. Go, go, go!
What matters are her 4 kids and her husband, Roberto.
It changed my marriage a little. My husband was so, like, over the top supportive.
So supportive, he shaved her head.
Breast cancer. Say hi, Roberto. Of breast cancer.
Hi.
Say hi, Steve. You still love me?
I do.
The 4 kids, Jaque says, took it in stride.
I thought they were doing fine until the other day that my son mentioned something that he was afraid that he would get cancer. So that kind of was like a shock to me, because in 2 years he had never said that. So I kind of had to sit down and talk with him with that. And I mean, there's just lots of little things, but all in all, I mean, I think I have a B+ in life right now.
An army of support in the small town of Douglas, a community with limited health care. Jaque drove to Tucson for every appointment, balancing a family, battling a deadly disease. It nearly broke her.
It's a roller coaster, up and down. Yeah, it's been very emotional for me. Because I thought I was so strong when all that was going on. But then when I had those 3-4 months of just, I was just lost. I didn't know what to feel. Like, I was sad, then I was happy, like from one minute to the next. And right now I'm happy. Like, I made it, and I made it with the help of a lot of people. It wasn't just me, it was my family. Also being able to talk about it with you guys and social media, because I didn't have to bottle it up. And I never wanted to. I never wanted people to feel sorry for me. So I think being able to talk to you and put it on social media and actually saying what I was feeling helped a lot because I didn't have to put on a front. I was telling people what it was. You know, and I look back at the videos, it's crazy how I've changed, how, you know, February of 2016 and then November of 2016, and right now we're almost back at that year again. And it's just crazy to see all the changes I went through.
And a lot has changed. Jaque changed her diet, she lost 40 pounds, and exercises every day.
I just feel so good, and I really think I owe it to that, you know, with exercising, because I've never done that. Like, I've never been a person to take time and exercise or take an hour out of my day for that. And now, like, I don't care if I have to go at 9 o'clock at night when the kids are in bed. I'll go walk because it just makes me feel better.
How old are you now?
33.
So how do you describe yourself at 33, Jaque Lamadrid?
I describe myself as a mom that goes crazy, like at least 20 times a day, because she has 4 kids, and I love them, but they're 4. There's 4 of them, and so there's so many things to do. And I describe myself as a strong woman that knows what she wants, that knows what she doesn't want. I describe myself as a thankful person that gives thanks to God and her family and friends every single day. And I mean, I don't want to say there's nothing that can knock me down, because you can never say never, but it's going to have to be something really good to knock me down, because I mean, why can't I tackle anything that comes to me? Everybody could tackle whatever comes to them. So, and I know this isn't the, you know, it wasn't, oh, you had cancer, that's the worst thing that's going to happen to you. I mean, I know there's going to be bumps and there's going to be highs and lows, but I think that cancer, the whole ordeal, helped me so much. It just prepared me for anything that comes my way. I'm going to get over it. I'm going to tackle it, and I'm going to keep being grateful and happy for everything that's came into my life, whether it be good or bad.
The diagnosis not defining.
But I'm so much more than a cancer survivor. Like, so much more than a cancer survivor. I'm thankful I got to survive cancer, but if that's one thing, there's 50 more things about me that are more important than that.
The fight of her life, it's her biggest win yet.
I handled it well, and I'm proud of myself. And that's what I always think, like, there's nothing that could like tear me down or crush me, because I've been through it, and I came out stronger than I was ever before.
And that's our program. Thank you so much for joining us.